The gigantic government sucks. Pursuit of happiness radio is deluxe. Liberty and freedom will make you smile. The pursuit of happiness on your radio dial. Just as cheeseburgers and liberty fries, it's pursuit of happiness time.
Okay, there's this giant chasm. You know what a chasm is? It's a chasm in Siberia. And they nickname it the Gateway to Hell. You ever seen this before? Apparently it has tripled in size over the past 30 years, probably to accommodate people who have tripled in size over that same period. Hi, I'm Kenny Webster. Thanks for turning on your radio. Now that I have your attention, a full hour of delightful terrestrial broadcast excellence about to come your way. If you're just turning us on, who's here this afternoon? Brandon Walton's stopping by from TexasScorecard.com. We're going to give you the latest in the Senate race between Concussion Beto, that's what we call Colin Allred, and Ted Cruz. The Democrats think they're going to take the state of Texas this year. The latest polling data doesn't quite suggest that that's the case. Oh, a very young child with autism, this is a horrible story, was left on a school bus up in Dallas for 8 hours. It's a good argument for school choice, and we'll explain why. We'll get to that. Plus, Christian Collins is stopping by from Texas Scorecard. Excuse me, not from the Texas Youth Summit, an entirely different Texas organization altogether, although certainly aligned in values. Christian Collins will be here. What's going on with him? Oh, yeah. There are gangbangers in the state of Texas. In fact, they're biker gang, who are supposedly heading up to Aurora, Colorado to go to war with a group of Venezuelan migrants. And Chicago gangbangers have said the same. But we'll get to all of that soon. But before we get to any of that, let's start off with this. Do y'all remember the Mandalay Bay massacre? Right after Trump took office, there was this big shooting in a casino in Las Vegas. And the people at the music festival at the casino who were targeted appear to have been country music loving, Trump Republican conservatives, mostly white. The FBI came in. They did this big, massive investigation. They have no idea what motivated the shooter. No idea. Guy commits an act of mass murder. We don't know why. Move along. Nothing to see here. The same could be said for the attempted assassination on Donald Trump. Remember that? No, you don't? Nobody could blame you. The media is done talking about it. The FBI came in. They said, we don't know what motivated this guy. We have no idea what motivated him. Probably killing Trump, I would imagine, would be the motivation. He didn't like Republicans. I'm just guessing. But even still, they said, no, we don't know. We know we acted alone. We know he was a lone shooter. Well, if you don't know what his motivation was, how do you know he was a lone shooter? Doesn't matter. Move along. And from there, did you hear this? The government burned his body. They incinerated the suspect's body, and then they hosed down the crime scene. So nobody could ever go back and figure out if there was anything else we didn't know. Nothing to see here. Move along. And all that, I say all that to make this point. Today, we may finally know a little something about the motivation of another mass murderer that the liberal media and your government overlords did not want you to know about. Do you remember the Tranifesto? You were supposed to forget about it. Back in March of 2023, a little over about a year and a few months, in Tennessee, a transgender person, a woman identifying as a man, I believe, went into a Christian public school and murdered people, children, adults. It's pretty obvious what motivated this person. It's a Christian school. The person is a member of the alphabet community, probably some vitriol there. But no, don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. Move along. And in fact, at the time, it was a very bizarre example of a judge putting the freedom of the press on trial in that Nashville trans shooter manifesto battle. The Federalist did a story on this a while back. Apparently, the CEO and editor-in-chief of the Tennessee Star said, I am a free man. I could continue to exercise my First Amendment rights. This was last year. Walked out of a Nashville courtroom. I'm sorry, this was earlier this year. And put out a statement saying they should be allowed to publish the manifesto. And a judge said, no, ought not. Tennessee Chancery Court Judge Miles had ordered the editor of the newspaper not to publish it. The transgender identified shooter murdered 6 people at a Nashville Christian school. The Star reported that it had obtained images of the 80 pages of the killer's journal that the police found in her vehicle as a woman identifying as a man. And Miles scheduled the case hearing to find out whether publishing portions of the killer's journal violated an order regarding the documents, whether they could face jail time if they did it. And a lot has happened since then. They've been a lot of going back and forth, and it's been over a year since that attack, and police, the government, still trying to hide the manifesto. Well, finally, the people at the Tennessee Star said, we've had no more. We are publishing it. And the various entries that referenced the mental health of the shooter revealed a purported autism diagnosis. She claimed she was not bipolar, wrote that she once called a phone number associated with a suicide prevention hotline, referenced her therapist multiple times. Her status as a 22-year mental health patient at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, where police documents obtained by the Star reveal she was twice evaluated for commitment. Interesting. And went on to say, quite expressing sexual fantasies, frustrations, fantasizing about stuffed animals, fantasizing about having an imaginary phallus, for lack of a better term. God must be a pervert. Calling Jesus the F word rhymes with baguette. I'll just leave it at that. Without getting too into details, the gruesome details of the manifesto kind of reveals exactly what you would expect. And once again, you have to wonder, if this was a right-wing motivated shooter, if this was a conservative motivated mass murder, would there have been these efforts by the industrial censorship complex, which is exactly what it is, to stifle this information, to prevent you from seeing it? And that's exactly what this is. The censorship industrial complex is a giant interwoven network, something of a deep state in and of itself, in our federal government, working on both the municipal, state, and federal levels to prevent you from getting information. You remember this from the 2020 election. The Hunter Biden laptop story. They didn't want you to know about it. They didn't want you to know what motivated the person that tried to murder Donald Trump. They didn't want you to know the motivations of the Mandalay Bay mass shooter. They certainly didn't want you to see this, although it was published today in the Tennessee Star. So you can see it, much to the chagrin of various liberal leftist entities. And once again, you have to wonder, if this person had been motivated by Judeo-Christian conservative values, would they have tried to stop you from seeing the manifesto? And of course, the answer is no, probably not.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, look, you, just shut your pie hole and keep working.
Back to the Pursuit of Happiness Radio.
This is Pursuit of Happiness Radio, celebrating liberty and freedom.
Whoa! Hi, we're back. McDonald's is introducing the biggest burger ever. They're calling it the Big Arch. In response, the American Medical Association is introducing type 1 diabetes, so that's very exciting. Isn't it weird that there's even a need for this? I mean, I know, like, I'm an advocate for be healthy, eat in mod, don't overeat, don't, take care of your health. We are poisoning ourselves all the time. But part of the reason I got to think McDonald's came out with the Big Arch is because, have you ever seen these photos on the internet of the Big Mac shrinking every year? It gets smaller and smaller. If you went back to the 1970s, the Big Mac cost $1 and it was 4 times as big as it is now. So now Big Macs aren't that big anymore. What happened? Shrinkflation. And it happened quite a bit. What is that? Stop. Sorry, my computer just started playing noise. How awkward. Anyway, the point is this. Inflation sucks. And buying food's expensive. Putting fuel in your car is expensive. Traveling is very expensive, which is why I want to thank those of you who joined us this past weekend for our trip to, where did we go? We went to Boston. Let me put it up on the screen here. We had a more clever name for this event than what we initially called it. Let me put that. There we go. Steve and Kenny do Boston. We were going to call it the Boston Beer Party, but it just didn't catch on. And anyway, so to those of you that went with on the trip last weekend, dozens of people went with us. We had a lot of fun. We went to Boston with radio listeners, and it's sort of bittersweet because we had fun. Not everybody could afford to do the trip, so you get it. It's expensive to travel this time. But we stayed at a very nice hotel. We all flew together on an unnamed airlines that I'm certainly not endorsing. And when we got there, we went on history tours. We toured around Boston. We learned about the Freedom Trail, they call it. We learned about the Sons of Liberty. We learned about Samuel Adams, and we learned about the so many of our founding fathers and the struggles that they went through and the fascinating story behind a lot of these very complicated men who lived complicated lives. Of course, they believed all men were created equal, but some of them were slave owners, and they certainly didn't let their wives vote. They weren't crazy or anything, but again, complicated, nuanced. Even still, the motivation was anti-government tyranny. You know that. You're probably watching this video because you're a libertarian or a conservative or that sort of thing. And we saw some examples of this on display while we were there last weekend, and then the obvious contradictions to it, the hypocrisy of it. I'll give you an example. The guy who was doing the tour with us was dressed like, he was dressed like one of the Sons of Liberty. He was dressed like Samuel Prescott. If you don't know who Samuel Prescott is, Paul Revere went on that famous ride to warn us that the British are coming, which of course is not something they ever would have said. They were all British. They never would have said the British are coming. They didn't call themselves Americans yet. That was a relatively new idea. Paul Revere never actually finished the ride. The real story of Paul Revere's ride is that it was finished by Samuel Prescott, a physician who probably would have gone on to be a very famous and powerful politician, if not for the fact that he was murdered by the actual British, the Redcoats, if you will. And so our tour guide in Boston, I thought he was a fun guy. He was a high school history teacher, took us on this tour. He talked all about government tyranny and liberty and fighting against the monarchy and that sort of thing. And then at the end of it, we asked him if he would take a photo with us. And he said he would not take a photo with our group because a couple of the people in the group were wearing Trump hats. And you just have to wonder, would you have said no? He said, we're like, oh, okay, so you're a liberal. He's like, no, I just don't want to be political. Okay. If one of these women wearing a Trump hat was a black lady wearing a Harris Walls shirt, would you have taken the photo then? And of course, you know the answer. And he dismissed us and he walked off, and that's fine, whatever. Okay. But that tour guide being a little hypocritical because he's a public school teacher, not even really the most hypocritical thing that we saw while we were in Boston. I think there were far more examples of hypocrisy in Boston. Remember, the whole point of these people in Boston creating our nation so many years ago, a tax on tea. You've all heard the story of the Boston Tea Party. Did you know that today, here in the year of our Lord, year 2024, in the city where they had the Boston Tea Party, in the city where Samuel Adams owned a brewery, did you know it is illegal to get a double shot of bourbon in a bar? They banned double shots and happy hour to make people safer in the city of Boston, maybe the drunkest, most racist city in America. And of course, it's filled with white liberal Democrats. No surprise there. But if you're in the city of Boston and you want to get a double shot of bourbon on a rock of ice, which is one of my favorite drinks, it's one of my big old rock of ice, 2 shots of bourbon. That's one of my favorite things to order in a bar. You would have to drive up to New Hampshire to get that. And so we didn't. We just found a bartender that was willing to break the rules for us. But apparently, some of the authoritarian leftism in the state of Massachusetts that vividly resembles the monarchy or tyranny from the 1700s is actually being challenged right now, thanks to the United States Constitution. Massachusetts tried to ban the switchblade. The Second Amendment to the United States Constitution undisputably protects your right to protect yourself and have self-defense and carry a firearm. But what about when it comes to the switchblade? Well, there's a report today at Reason.com that talks a little bit about this. And in Massachusetts, the highest state court said, you know what? Can't do it. It's a knife. It's a blade. The Second Amendment protects your right to own a gun. It certainly protects your right to own a switchblade. So the highest court said, we conclude switchblades are not dangerous and unusual weapons falling outside the protection of the Second Amendment. This was written by Justice Sergey Georges Jr., Jorge Jr., I don't know how he pronounces his name, Supreme Court Justice for the state of Massachusetts, in an opinion, Commonwealth versus Canjura, that drew heavily on 2 landmark U.S. Supreme Court cases. And the decision found that the state's ban on switchblade knives unconstitutional, and so it was dismissed. Fantastic. That was the right thing to do. Now, with all that being said, there's still a lot of laws in the state of Massachusetts that don't really make a whole hell of a lot of sense. I'll give you an example. While I was there, I had a little bit of time. We had some downtime between the tours and the stuff we were doing with the group. So I took a Uber because I didn't have a rental car. I took a ride share out to the suburbs to a little community called Newton. And I'm told that out in the area where I'm at, I think is basically the general area where, do you remember the Boston Marathon bomber? I think he lived out there for a while. That's kind of what they're famous for. They're also famous for Joe Rogan living out there for a while. And then also this other bizarre news story. Somebody at the gym told me, I went out to the gym, starting strength gym, lifting weights, and everybody at the gym wanted to know, what's it like to live in Texas? Do you guys all own guns? I said, yeah, we all own guns. It's Texas. It's a Second Amendment right. We have a right to own guns. They said, man, what's that like? What are you guys talking about? You guys all have a right to own guns as well. I said, nah, we really don't here. There was an incident here in the suburbs of Boston a while back where a contractor, a guy, who works with tools, building things for a living, had this experience where somebody kept breaking into his truck at night. It was repeatedly happening over and over again. I said, well, what did he do? He came out one night and he confronted the guy that was breaking into his truck. And wouldn't you know it, they got into a fight. One thing led to another. And the criminal ended up getting shot and killed. And I bet you already see where this story's going because they don't have castle doctrine in the state of Massachusetts. They certainly don't have stand your ground. At least, I don't know, I'm not an attorney in Massachusetts, but that's how the local people there were explaining it to me. Apparently, the guy got into trouble for defending his own home, which is just insanity. Says, I look back on what I learned last weekend in Boston. The founding fathers, Paul Revere, Samuel Prescott, Samuel Adams, Benjamin Franklin. What would they have thought in Massachusetts in the year 2024? Elizabeth Warren being charged of the state and all the other bizarre laws all the things that have turned Massachusetts into a far left, authoritarian, totalitarian nightmare. I got to think they probably would have moved to Texas. Hey, greetings to everybody watching me on social media right now. I'm just recording rants, monologues, if you will, for my afternoon show. Hello to Paul watching me on social media. And if anybody else happens to be watching me, hey, share this video if you don't mind. I'm Kenny Webster. I host a popular morning show in Houston, Texas that can be heard on dozens of radio stations all over the South. It's called The Walton and Johnson Show. If you don't have our smartphone app, you could download it for iPhones in the Apple App Store or for your Androids in the Google Play Store. And if this is the first time checking out this show, every afternoon I have a local show that just airs here in Houston on KPRC 950. There's a podcast for that as well. You can listen to both shows on the smartphone app. I'm going to bounce. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great afternoon. I'm Kenny Webster. Please drive safe out there. We'll see you back bright and early tomorrow morning for